Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Craig.
And I'm Todd.
Last week, Todd picked the movie, and after that was a total nightmare. I thought that maybe I would try to pick something this week and see if I could do a little bit better. So...
I guess it depends on how you define better.
So I went looking around on all, my streaming services, and the movie that caught my eye was 1994's Tammy and the T-Rex, starring baby Denise Richards and baby Paul Walker. Found this on Shudder, where it is available to stream in its original uncut version. The version that was originally released in 1994 was heavily edited to get a PG-13 rating and be considered more fun family fare. But fortunately, the version that we saw is the hour-and-a-half version with some of the original gore and a couple of other things put back in. I really didn't know a whole lot about this movie going in, other than it looked and sounded crazy, and I thought that it might be kind of fun. Todd, you know anything about this movie going in?
I didn't know a thing about it. I mean, 1994, I was in high school, well into high school, and I was a massive Denise Richards. I was basically in love with her after Starship Troopers came out, which I think was only a few years after this, right? Uh-huh. She was 22 in this movie. And as soon as I saw that she was starring in this, I was like, oh, man, this is going to be a lot of fun. And I couldn't believe how young she was. This is a fun movie, but I never heard anything about it before or since. I guess it was, released to VHS, more or less, and then kind of forgotten by history, right? Didn't get a wide release, and it didn't really function well as a family film in a PG-13 format because apparently... clearly large chunks of scenes would have to be cut to cut out the tremendous gore that exists alongside this otherwise just goofy to the point of corny sex comedy, right? It was almost there were so many sex jokes in this movie, and it's so over the top. Like there's a doctor who talks, has a heavy German accent. And he has an assistant, Helga, who's tall and buxom, who barely speaks. And every other line in this movie is some double entendre or joke. And what I read, because we haven't seen the PG-13 version, but I read that the PG-13 version cuts out all the gore, but still leaves all of this sex jokes. I can't even imagine, it's just so silly.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, to even call this a horror movie is kind of a stretch. I mean, there are, I guess, some horror elements, and there is a little bit of gore, and
there's a lot of gore, and
some really, really fun practical effects. But really, it's a screwball comedy.
Yeah.
We've done a few other movies kind of in this vein. Like, I'm thinking like Spookies we talked about at one point.
Yep.
Bloodbath at the House of Death. So it's not entirely new territory for us, but it is a little bit different than our usual fare. But I have to say, honestly, when I was looking at what we should do this week, I watched the first 5 or 10 minutes of 2 or 3 movies. There were a couple of others that caught my eye too, but just the first 5 minutes of this movie, I thought, this is going to be so good.
Yeah.
So finally, once I landed on this, I sat and watched it by myself, as I always do, and oh my gosh, I was just giggling and laughing the whole time, and I always take notes, and I always take way more notes than I need to, because I usually barely even look at them when we're actually talking. But what I found myself doing in this movie was just writing down lines, because there were so many hilarious lines, and they're juvenile and stupid, and right up my alley, because I was just cracking up the whole time. And the other thing that I really liked about this movie that I had really no idea going in is it's got, I want to say, an amazing cast.
It's true.
Not because it's cast full of Oscar-winning performers, but because there are so many recognizable faces in this movie. And, somebody would come on screen and I'd be like, it's Buck Flowers.
Yeah. Good old Buck Flowers.
Or, it's that creepy kid from Children of the Corn.
Mm-hmm. Or, it's Roach from The People Under the Stairs.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So many fun cameos for people like us who like these dumb movies.
And it's so dated too. And we live in this time, right? We love this late 80s, early 90s stuff, and this movie is just dripping with it. The costumes that people are wearing at points in this film are just over the top products of their time. And the movie kicks off, probably, you watch the first 5 minutes, that's pretty much just the title sequence, right? It's just these leering shots going through these girls working out in a gym with all their leotards and stuff on, and this pumping, like 80s pop sort of rock song in the background that somehow ties into the theme of the movie.
The whole song is written from the perspective of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and it's hilarious. It's so funny. And Denise Richards plays Tammy, even though the title card says Tanny and the T-Rex, and she's billed as Tanny in the credits.
What's the story behind that?
Well, the filmmaker, it's directed by a guy named Stuart Raffle, and I don't remember if it was he who said this, but somebody said, we wanted to make throw everybody off, because you never really know what's reality. The line between reality and fiction is so blurred. And I just, in the back of my mind, have to believe that that's just totally bullshit, and they just screwed up the title card. Didn't care to go back and fix it.
It's kind of a weird Comic Sans font anyway, so it could have just been a typo.
Oh boy. Oh, it's funny. But Denise Richards plays Tammy, and she's, I guess it's cheerleading practice, and she's a terrible dancer. That may have to do with the fact that this movie was thrown together, I think, in 3 weeks. And the inception of the movie is interesting to me, because the writer-director, Stuart Raffle, as I said, was approached by some guy who owned some theaters or something in South America, and he just happened to have this animatronic T-Rex, and he's like, I've got this. I'm going to be sending it to, he was going to be sending it to a theater or a museum or something within about a month, but he had it available, and so the writer-director was like, okay, I'll use it. And he wrote the script in about a week, and they filmed it over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And he has said that he's a major cheater as well, because he wrote it so quickly that just in the moment as they were shooting, he would ask the actors or anybody else on set, do you guys have any better ideas? Because this is all I got.
Come up with some good lines for us, please. And you have to imagine that happened. I mean, it had to have happened, because some of these lines are so golden. Some of these lines are the kind of lines that probably have been in one person's head forever, and they were just dying to use them until finally given the chance. They're just groaners, right? Groaner jokes left and right.
They are, but
they're fun.
But they're so funny.
Yeah.
And I think that part of the reason why the movie works is that it seems like everybody knew exactly what they were doing. This is a bad movie, and they knew it going in.
Yeah.
They were making a stupid movie. And at times, it's so overplayed that it's ridiculous, but at the same time funny. And at times, especially Denise Richards is like given her absolute all, like
in the most ridiculous situations, she manages to play it straight. It's impressive. Yeah.
Denise Richards is a beautiful, beautiful woman, but I don't think that anybody has ever accused her of being an amazing actress.
No.
But she looks great. And so she's dancing to the T-Rex song, and what turns out to be, I guess, not necessarily her boyfriend, but this guy that is interested in her and she's interested in, walks in, and it is a 17-year-old Paul Walker. And I swear that throughout the course of the movie, I couldn't decide who was prettier, Tammy or Michael.
Yeah.
Because they are both just
stunningly
so pretty.
Gorgeous people.
Well, and Paul Walker, he looks 17. He can't weigh more than like 160 pounds soaking wet. He's just this beanpole kid, but so cute and so charming and so charismatic. And it really is tragic that he was taken before his time. But it's also interesting to see these young actors, both of whom would go on to have successful careers. Denise Richards, had her spotlight kind of in the late 90s, early aughts. But Paul Walker passed away in the middle of one of the biggest movie franchises in the world in history.
Yeah.
So I think that his star would have continued to rise, and he seemed like a really cool guy, a nice, charitable, conscientious guy, and it really is sad that his life was cut short. But it was really nice to see him young and handsome. Not that he ever wasn't handsome, but so anyway, he walks in. They're both wearing crop tops. Did football players ever really wear crop tops?
I don't
or
know.
Is that just a thing in the movies?
Not at my school.
Not in my school either.
Even in the 90s, I don't remember that happening. But nevertheless, in the films, you'd think they were all wearing them. And nobody got made fun of for it.
And they, they're cute, and they walk out together, and they bump into her friend, Byron, who is just this, who introduces himself by saying, "Work it, girl." And I don't know if he's talking to Tammy or Michael.
Work it, girl.
Hi, Byron.
Oh, my goodness.
Byron, meet Michael.
It's a pleasure to meet you in the flesh. Tammy talks about you all the time. And I can say, girl, you didn't exaggerate one little bit. Well, I got to fly. Bye, Michael.
But he's just this completely stereotypical gay guy and stereotypical black guy, in so much as the way that he acts and talks is really flamboyant, and then he dresses in like traditional, well, surely not really, but like faux traditional African garb. Like, I don't know what this talking about race right now is very, sketchy, but things were different in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting in a better way, but you could kind of get away with playing to these stereotypes for comedy, and that is what is going on here. But he's hilarious. Like, he's so funny.
Yeah.
He's kind of her sidekick throughout the movie, and he's funny. I don't know, the actor's name is Theo Forsett. He doesn't have very many credits at all. In fact, I think it was like 20 years or something after this movie was made before he had one more acting credit or something like that. But funny guy, and paired really well. She's the straight man kind of in their duo, and he's the comic relief. Just hilarious.
It's good screenwriting, especially when you're on a rush trying to do something fast, as you throw this duo together, and they're basically the duo throughout the movie with everything that happens, and they can play to each other like Laurel and Hardy or Abbott and Costello.
Yeah.
And she pulls a flower out of her backpack and hands it back is returning it to Michael and says, "I'm sorry, I can't accept this." And he's like, "Why not?" She's like, "Because he'll kill you." So she has a thing for him, he has a thing for her, but she has this ex-boyfriend who we're immediately introduced to because suddenly, just like a storm, a car pulls up and 20 people come jumping out of it, running up to them. And Billy is full on bully asshole, like he should be in prison. Kind of over the top.
He's also like 35.
Yeah, he's supposed to be a teenager, but they're doing their best to try to make him look young, and it doesn't work.
Michael, you gotta get out of here.
I'm not running from this guy, Tammy.
He's going to hurt you.
And if he touches me, I'm gonna hurt him back. What the hell you think you're doing,
Billy,
man?
you're gonna get in a
I'm
lot
walking
of
with
trouble.
this. You stay out of this. I'm walking with this lady. What do you think you're doing, man? That's my lady, all right?
Billy, leave him
You stay
alone.
out of this. Don't you touch, man. Touch me, man. Hey, man, come on. You know something? I'm not gonna kill you this time. Ready. It's cool.
And he is just aggressively angry. And this was, I mean, full-on trauma mode, I think.
Yeah.
You know,
it reminded me so much of Trauma. Yeah.
Right? Every trauma movie has this character in it who's just insane, and you know he's going to kill somebody. And he would be in prison if he existed in the real world. And it makes absolutely no sense that he's pretty much allowed to run around with abandon, do whatever he wants in this movie, and no authority figures whatsoever ever step in and do anything about it.
and he's got a whole gang of lackeys, like 6 of them. One of them you mentioned, Sean Whalen, Roach from The People Under the Stairs. He plays Weasel, and he's kind of Billy's sidekick. But when she had given him that flower, when Tammy had given Michael the flower, it also had a bracelet on it, apparently, that he had given her. And when she handed it to him and said, "I can't take this," he's like, "Oh, okay." And then he eats it.
Yes.
And
what was that?
What is happening? It was a setup for later, but in the moment, I'm like, what is he?
So weird.
I guess he was being cute and funny. I don't know. But right away, Billy and Michael get into a fight, and it's a hilariously choreographed.
Yeah.
And it ends when Billy grabs Michael by the dick, and I wish there are sometimes that I wish on this podcast that we could show you things, because the way that he arches his back and screams
and freezes in place, unable to move.
So the way for him to retaliate then is he then grabs Billy's dick, and so they're both just standing there squeezing each other's peckers.
In the meanwhile, Byron's going, "Oh, that's a good move." Just in the background, casually. And then 2 police officers jump in. One of them is Buck Flowers. And they're going to break it up. And Buck Flowers looks over at the other guy and goes,
What we got here is one of them testicular stand-ons.
You're not squeezing much, Michael.
Oh my gosh.
That's basically the through line of the whole film.
It is. There's the tone right there. And the cops finally get them apart, and Billy is still moaning and groaning, but Michael's not. And the cop's like, "What's the matter, boy? Ain't you got a dick?" And he goes, "I got a cup on," and just smiles great big. Just the silliest jokes. But Billy threatens him, and Michael tries to chase Tammy, but she incredibly melodramatically screams at the top of her lungs, "Leave me alone!" and runs away. Oh my gosh. And then we cut to a different scene with different characters, and that's when we meet Dr. Wackenstein, played by Terry Kaiser, who most people would probably recognize as Bernie from Weekend at Bernie's. And he's got this great German accent, and he's got, like you said, this assistant named Helga, who's about 7 feet tall and just busty and sexy, and like you said, doesn't talk very much. And he's got a couple other lackeys too. He's got one big beefy lackey, and he's got this other, I don't know, the scientist or,
like a
or something.
Scientist, computer nerd or something. Who's...
I thought of him as kind of the Igor to Walkenstein's Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Frankenstein, excuse me. His name's Bobby, and he's played by John Franklin, who was the main kid, the leader of the Children of the Corn in
Isaac,
the original
I think.
film. Yes. Yeah. And he has this big animatronic T-Rex. And that's something else that I love about this movie. Like, what it's going to come down to is Dr. Walkenstein needs a brain to put into this T-Rex for reasons unknown. It's never explained. he just wants to, I guess.
Yeah. Your Igor character is put off by this because he thinks his computer is better. Like you said, there's no real... I'm trying to figure out why he decided to build a dinosaur to transfer a human brain into for these experiments. I mean, later, way later in the movie, he's talking with Helga, and we get a little bit of explanation in that he has this idea that we'll soon be able to transplant brains into robot bodies and nobody will ever die again, and that people will be able to transplant all kinds of bodies and they'll make so much money selling these robots. So why he chooses a dinosaur for his very first experiment is a question that's never answered, of course, except for the fact that the producers of the movie had a dinosaur they needed to use. And I've got to say that the writer-director of this movie, like you said, Stuart Raffel, he's pretty smart. I mean, you get an animatronic dinosaur that's kind of limited, and it's definitely not going to match Jurassic Park level quality.
Right.
You don't want to make a dinosaur movie. It's going to look really stupid and lame. But he used the fact that's animatronic. Throughout the whole movie, we know it's animatronic. That's a plot point. And so therefore, yeah, okay, that's fine. I mean, it neatly gets around that problem of the effect, right?
Uh-huh.
But this assistant goes up and then they test the dinosaur, and he goes up to test his strength, and he goes, test his strength! And so this guy is like Arnold Schwarzenegger, hefts this dumbbell at the dinosaur, which in its tiny little T-Rex claws just grabs it, nonchalantly tosses it right back at him.
Right.
And then in a scene that looks really dumb. And then he picks up a big log and he puts it into the dinosaur's jaw. And the man upstairs presses a few buttons into the computer, and the dinosaur closes its jaw and just completely crushes this thing.
Excellent. And now, my pet, all you need is mobility. I mean, life beyond this boring room and the limitations of a stupid computer. And I, my love, will give you that freedom. I will give you everything. I will give you a brain. I will give you immortality.
Okay. He's just asking for trouble.
Oh, it's hilarious. But you're right, because it does look like an animatronic. Now, to be fair, it's a pretty good animatronic. I mean, it's
not bad.
Especially in the face, it's got some good movement. Now, the arms and the walking... when it does actually become mobile, it's really, really hokey, but they're not trying to go beyond that. It's supposed to look hokey. It's hilarious. And then there are scenes later in the movie where Denise Richards is supposed to be riding the dinosaur, and you just you see it like from a distance, and it really looks like somebody just has like a toy dinosaur with a Barbie on it that they're like moving across the screen. Oh, it's wonderful. It's so good.
It is hilariously bad. Yeah.
But getting back to Michael and Tammy, she calls him and she apologizes tearfully, and he's all glum. But she says, "But I want you to come over." And then immediately he's super, super excited and happy.
Oh, okay. I'll be right there.
I'll be right there.
By the way, that was the most realistic scene and acting in the whole film.
Yeah, and he jumps up and he puts on his jacket and he heads out the door, and then he turns around and he comes back in and he opens his nightstand and he like rifles around in there and he pulls out a condom and he kisses it. and then heads out and climbs the trellis into her room, but some of Billy's friends see, and so they call Billy. Tammy and Michael make out a little bit and say they love each other and they're both so pretty, but then Billy's gang shows up and like
invades
breaks
the house.
into the house. Like this whole gang of teenagers like breaks the door down. Her parents are down there.
And they're just standing aside basically while this happens.
Yeah. They, what's his name? Michael goes out the window, but they chase him and they catch him and they beat him up a little bit and they throw him into the trunk of the car and drive to a wild cat sanctuary.
Wild animal park, which is secured by just a metal gate with a chain. And padlock, which they break through and drive their car into amongst lions that are walking around and jaguars roaming freely within this park, or presumably preserved.
That looks like the size of, like a small city park. And all these... I don't know how this works, but I would think that you wouldn't just have all of these different species of wild cats in the same enclosure. But what do I know? I don't know. And they're real cats. I mean... Yeah.
I mean, there are... I have been... Okay, so Beijing has an actual zoo like this. It's called the Beijing Wild Animal Zoo or whatever, and I recently went there. And they have kind of like a Disney's Animal Kingdom where there's a safari where you can get on a bus and they take you through these areas where these wild animals are roaming fairly freely around the road, and you can look through the windows and you can poke meat out and feed them and stuff. But of course, they're contained. It's like Stalag 16 going through. You go in one gate, the gate closes behind you, a gate opens in front of you, and then you drive out. They have all these measures to keep these animals in. And then there's another section of the park where you can actually take your own car through. So you can drive through a similar area where they're roaming freely in your own vehicle. And about 2 years ago, it made, I think, pretty much international news where a couple was driving through here with their parents in the back seat. And the guy and the girl got in a fight, and this woman got out of the car and stormed around to the other side, and a lion just leaped out of the bushes and grabbed her and dragged her away.
Oh, no. It's horrible.
It's horrible, right? Like, and there's video of the entire thing. It's on the internet. I mean, it's really distressing. But that's one thing you don't do in a wild animal park is get out of the car when there are these animals roaming freely. And what do they do once they drive into this park and we've seen all of these animals roaming freely is they all just casually get out of the car and throw Billy on the ground. All I could think about was that in the back of my mind. I'm like, these people aren't terribly smart.
No.
But
surprise,
then again,
surprise.
Neither is the plot of the film. So,
exactly.
Yeah.
So they leave him there. At first, he doesn't even know where he is, but eventually he is pursued in the most docile of ways by a lion and
trotting after them.
And then he climbs a tree, and then there's like a panther in the tree, and so he jumps back down out of the tree, and the lion attacks him and mauls him until I guess like a park ranger or something shows up and fires his gun and gets the lion off. But, as is often the case for people who are attacked by lions, Michael is physically unharmed, but put into a coma.
Right.
So he's in a coma, and we see him in the hospital, and Tammy and Byron are there visiting him. And
Byron sits on Uncle Bob. There's this guy sitting in a chair against the wall who's asleep. And Byron goes, oh, what did I do? And she's like, oh, you sat on Uncle Bob. It's his only guardian. So we get this information that Michael is, an orphan, I guess, or his parents died and whatnot. This is his only living relative. Uncle Bob doesn't wake up after Byron sits on him, but
he's a drunk. That's the big joke is Uncle Bob's the town drunk or whatever. But unbeknownst to them, Walkenstein and Helga are also there at the hospital, hunting for a brain, I guess. And they come in and hilariously fake Michael's death. I mean, the Walkenstein, Helga messes with the machine to make it look like he flatlines, and then Walkenstein jumps on top of him, straddles him, and starts doing fake CPR. Yeah. Live! 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 Live!
Well, that's it. I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I did all I could.
He's gone. And both Tammy and Byron faint in horror, and they wheel Michael out. Once they get him outside, he wakes up from his coma and it's like, what's going on? So they knock him out again and take him back to their lab/warehouse where the T-Rex is. And then the whole lobotomy scene, it's just ridiculous. I mean, the whole time that I was watching this, I was thinking this was perfect fare for one of our favorite late night TV shows of the 80s, Up All Night.
Oh yeah,
it was just it's slapstick ridiculous comedy. But this lobotomy scene is so hilarious. They've got him on a gurney or whatever, and the Dr. Walkenstein saws his head off, and it's some cheap but reasonable practical effects with the cutting and whatnot. But then they take his skull cap off. Walkenstein starts poking electrodes into different parts of his brain and says, each part of the brain controls a different area. And he says, watch this. And he pokes the brain, and Paul Walker's leg shoots up in the air. And then he says, oh, now watch this one. And he pokes it. A huge fake wiener pops up underneath his gown. And he
Paul
just
Walker gets a 3-foot boner.
And he just keeps poking it, so it just is popping up and down.
And wiggling around.
And Walkenstein's like, I will have to remember that one for later. It's so silly. And he puts the brain in the T-Rex, and I guess he says something like, I'll finish the procedure tomorrow or something like that. It's not supposed to be done. Everybody goes away. The two lackeys, the big hulking one and the little Igor one, go off and order a pizza or something. And when the pizza guy arrives, which, by the way, did you recognize the little pizza guy? He was,
No.
He was Pedro from Napoleon Dynamite.
No kidding. You're absolutely right. Wow.
The pizza guy comes in, and the T-Rex starts moving, and it scares him, and he runs away. And there's a little bit of comedy with the guys, getting their pizza and whatnot. But then eventually the T-Rex is awake, and the little scientist, Bobby, is yelling at it, telling it what to do or something. I don't remember. But then it lowers its head and bites his head off. And this happens more than once, and it's so funny because the actors have to stand so still for this animatronic to be able to lower down right over it. They virtually have to jump into it. Or gingerly place their heads inside so it can rip their heads off. But it does. It rips his head off, and there's blood and guts and all kinds of stuff. And when the big guy comes back, the T-Rex, I think, chases him outside and then crushes him somehow?
Yeah, steps on his chest and...
Oh, yeah, he steps on him and totally crushes him.
Face. Yeah.
All I can remember is that sometime later in the movie, Helga and Walkenstein find this guy, and Helga just rolls him up Like,
Yes.
he's just flat like a pancake.
It's a total sight gag. And the way that the dinosaur walks is we get these shots from below up, and we just see him gliding forward like they're pushing the animatronic along on a trolley. And then we'll get another close-up shot of his legs where there's obviously somebody with, dinosaur feet who's just stomping forward. The rubber, actually, you can say the rubber might flex weird and stuff because it's an animatronic. So, it's just a rubber skin over the outside. That's the brilliance of the effects of this movie, right? They working with what they have. But then the T-Rex scares an old lady away off of a payphone, goes up to the phone, and then you just see his head is there, and you see these tiny little T-Rex arms, which suddenly must have grown to be like 4 feet long to be able to do all of the things they're doing and to be able to move in the rapid and highly articulated way that the rest of the dinosaur cannot. To be able to pick up the phone, dial the buttons very casually, and call the girlfriend. Denise Richards, Tammy. It's so funny, every scene where this dinosaur uses his hands, it's like just there's the dinosaur head and bink, up pops somebody's arm in a dinosaur claw, glove, who can then make hand signals and manipulate things and pick stuff up and do whatever in a very unconvincing way.
Right. Check for loose quarters in the slot of the payphone.
It's so great.
It is great. And it calls Tammy, but it can't talk because it's a T-Rex. So instead, it goes off to a party. Somebody's throwing a party, and for whatever reason, Tammy, even though her boyfriend just died that day, is there. But she's very, very upset.
Not upset enough, but very upset.
Denise Richards sitting at a table with her arms crossed and a sour look on her face. Like... She was perfect. This might be her finest performance, frankly. This and Wild Things.
Meanwhile, Byron's walking up like, "Hey, cheer up, girl. It ain't that bad." Like, what?
But Billy shows up, and so she's out of there. So she leaves, and then we see that the T-Rex is coming to the party, and this is 94. What year did Jurassic Park come out? Didn't Jurassic Park come out in 94?
Oh yeah, or the year before. Yeah, I think it was 93. Mm-hmm.
And so they totally do the gag where you see, like all the like red Solo cups and all the other party cups sitting on a table shaking, and people are like, "What's going on? Is it an earthquake?" Meanwhile, some skank has gotten a hold of Billy and taken him off to a convertible where they have loud sex with all of their clothes on.
Yeah. Her legs are straight up in the air, and that car is moving. The convertible is moving like you wouldn't believe, and she is screaming. But they both have their clothes on. And then the T-Rex comes over behind her above, and her screaming just gets him more and more excited because her intensity level has risen. Right? I'm good, right? I'm good, right? But it comes down and bites her leg off. Picks her up, actually, by the legs, and throws her away. What happens to her? Does she get eaten?
I guess she does. No, because later when the cops arrive, there's a bunch of dead people, but one of the cops says, we found a bunch of dead people and a one-legged girl over there. She's still pretty hot, though. But Billy runs away and runs into the party, and the T-Rex chases, and then there's just carnage. Like, I don't remember exactly how all it happens. At some point, Weasel is peeing and sees that he's peeing on the foot of the T-Rex, and the T-Rex takes its, little rubber hand and scratches him down the front of his torso, which totally disembowels him. All of his guts fall out all over. And then it's in the party, and everybody's screaming and running, and it's killing people, and eventually it bites Billy's head off again.
That surprised me. I thought we'd see Billy through the whole movie causing trouble.
I did too.
Yeah.
But no, he's gone. But as it's chasing people, one of the people it's chasing is Byron, and Byron trips and falls, and the T-Rex picks him up, sets him back down on his feet, brushes off his jacket, and lets him go on his way.
That was a nice touch.
So later Byron's like, I knew that T-Rex knew me. Oh gosh.
Those little T-Rex hands gingerly brushing the dust off of his shoulder was a really nice touch.
So funny.
God.
The cops show up and start trying to question people, but and the chief of police turns out to be Byron's dad, I think. But Buck Flowers and the other guy are still there too, and the chief is trying to ask people questions, but they're not getting any answers, and I'm pretty sure it was Buck Flowers who says, "They're in shock. You're going to have to slap it out of them." And these lines, I wrote them down because I thought they were so funny, and now here I'm saying it, and they sound so stupid, and they are stupid. But you have to see this movie to really get the humor. I mean, take our word for it if you want, but really, watch this movie. It's really funny.
It is.
Back to Helga and Walkenstein, who are excited because even though the T-Rex wasn't supposed to have been activated yet, it proves that it works. So they're all excited about that. Then the T-Rex goes to Tammy's house, and she's just casually, I don't know, brushing her hair or something.
In her bedroom.
Yeah, when she sees it, either in the mirror or she turns around and sees it or whatever, she screams and passes out again. And her parents hear her scream and go to check on her, but she's gone, and it looks like she's gone out the window, like the curtains are blowing out the window or something. She wakes up in a barn, and that T-Rex is there with her. We keep saying T-Rex. It's probably maybe 10 feet tall? It's not
as
enormous.
tall it's big, but not that tall.
Right.
I guess big enough to reach into the second story of a house. Ooh, maybe not, actually.
Not really with its arms.
No.
Maybe with its head.
Even a 10-foot tall T-Rex to be able to just apparently walk around town without being seen is kind of funny. Walked down the suburban neighborhood, pulled her out of the window, took her back to some remote barn, and nobody reported it. Okay.
And this scene is hilarious too because Denise Richards plays it straight. At first,
oh gosh,
she's scared, but then when it seems pretty obvious that it's not trying to hurt her, then she just goes along with trying to communicate with it. And there's this whole scene where it's trying to explain that it's Michael, and it plays charades. And then somehow it has a flower, and it eats the flower, and it points to her bracelet. And so finally she figures out that it's him. And once she figures out that it's him, she's totally fine with it and in love with him.
Yes. It's basically like we have a scene later where she is laying down with the dinosaur's arms wrapped around hers, and they're both taking a nap. I mean, it's really pretty funny. I was thinking actually shades of, you remember a long time ago, was it Deadly Friend?
Yeah.
When the guy puts the girl's brain of this girlfriend who dies into another girl? Was that right? A corpse? Or was it a robot?
I don't remember what it was. It was Christy Swanson,
and they end up in the barn.
I don't remember. It's been a long time.
Gosh, it was so funny. Some of these scenes were just like it, too, because they end up in the barn, and they kind of, passionately embrace, and they lay down, and they wake up the next morning, and all this stuff. I was like, except in this case, one was a giant animatronic dinosaur. Minor difference.
Well, she goes home, and her parents are there with the cops outside, and she just strolls up, and she's like, "Hi, Daddy!" And he's like, "Where have you been?" And he's like, "What happened?" She's like, "I don't know. It must have been a meteor or something." I just went out to see if I could find it or something like that. she tells Byron, and she says, we have to get his body back. We can do it at the funeral. So then we cut to the funeral, which is just like, it looks like it's in like a parking lot or something. It's got all these fake prop, like cardboard tombstones. She is dressed like Six from Blossom, or like like the lead singer of Four Non-Blondes in the What's Up video.
Yeah.
It's so funny.
And they're just standing around, and there's a giant bush there, and behind the giant bush, apparently where only she can see it, the dinosaur's head is poking over the top, watching his own funeral.
And drunk Uncle Bob gives a eulogy. Everybody's crying, including the T-Rex. Like, tears are streaming down its face.
What?
Oh my
When
God.
did it get this ability? Yeah, so funny. This is my favorite scene because after it's all gone, the dino comes out and surprises Byron. I think this is the first time he sees it, but it's like, I can't believe I'm going to do this, but we need to. And she jumps into the grave because I guess her idea is that they're going to try to get Michael's body out of there and get the brain back into his body. Was that what she was thinking?
Uh-huh.
So she opens the coffin and goes, ah, because Michael's body is half decomposed and there
Right.
are rats all over it.
And maggots. Yeah.
Like, what was she expecting to see? I just thought this was hilarious. Like, this is a brilliant idea. Like, it's such a movie thing. Like, oh, this person just died. We're going to open the coffin and we're going to embrace their body one more time. I loved that.
Yeah.
Loved that.
And somehow Helga shows up and they have a girl fight, which was funny. Tammy, I guess, after she fights Helga, I don't know, I'm trying to follow my notes. I have Helga and Tammy fight, and then Tammy says to Michael, we're going to find you another body, I promise. So Tammy and Byron go to the morgue, where they just start looking around, like shopping for bodies, and they find one hot guy. And Byron's like, what about this one? And he lifts up the blanket and she's like, yeah, he's okay. And then Byron lifts it up further and she gives, like, she doesn't like its dick. She's like, ooh, no, not for me. But then the T-Rex is outside. So they start pulling all these corpses up to the windows for Michael's approval, but he keeps not approving. And at one point, Byron lifts a girl up there. And Tammy's like, no, I don't want a girl. I want a boy. And Byron's like, well, it's not really up to you. It's up to him. But they're interrupted in that because Helga and Walkenstein try to steal. The T-Rex is in the back of this big truck, and they try to steal it, I think. And so Tammy and Byron have to run out there, and I think that the police are out there, and somehow Tammy and Byron end up in the truck, and they take off, and the police start chasing them, and Byron says, hang on to your boobs, girl, it's gonna be a bumpy ride, and Denise Richards grabs her boobs and just holds on to them. Oh, it's the silliest thing. It's so funny. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
There's a little car chase. They pull over and Byron gets out and tries to stall, but he gets handcuffed, and that's when we get the amazing shot of Tammy riding the T-Rex. And then it all kind of comes to a head the next morning. They go back to their same barn that they were at before, and that's when you see them waking up in the morning like spooning, like the T-Rex is spooning her. and Byron comes there. He knows to go there because Tammy had told him that's where they went last time. But unbeknownst to him, he's been followed by the police, and Walkenstein and Helga show up, and that's kind of where the final, I suppose, showdown happens. And the whole time I was looking at the time, not because I was bored. I was not at all bored watching this movie, but I realized there were still like 10 or 15 minutes left, and I'm like, what are they gonna do? Yeah. And this last scene just kind of stretched out for a while, but it was funny nonetheless. Showdown at the barn. I don't remember. I think she shouts out to the cops, "Leave him alone! He's my boyfriend!"
And then Byron's like, give me something white. She's like, I don't have anything white. He's like, oh, I know you do. And then the next shot is they come stepping out of the barn, and he's got, I guess, her bra that he's waving on his stick. And they're like, oh, well, we're not surrendering. We've come to negotiate. And there ain't going to be no negotiation and all this stuff. Anyway, the doctor has trying to convince the cops that he can go in and shoot it with a tranquilizer. And at this moment, I'm thinking, what good is that going to do? It's animatronic. And at that point, I think maybe Byron speaks up and says, what good's that going to do? He's not a real dinosaur. He's animatronic. And the cops are like, oh, yeah. And the doctor comes up with some bullshit explanation like,
It's a new system. Brand new. It's very secretive, but under the circumstances, I suppose I have no alternative. You see, the dinosaur has a new memory system. A new computer created by growing living crystals into memory cells. It's very new indeed. In fact, it is so new that, we are hoping that it'll put America back on top.
And the two rednecky cops look at each other and go, okay, I approve of that. He pulls out a tranquilizer gun that's massive.
Relax, this is a tranquilizer gun. I know it looks big, but they don't make small tranquilizer guns.
What are you going to do? And then he walks in, but does not succeed because, of course, he gets attacked by Michael, who very quickly takes a huge bite out of the doctor's chest, and he falls backwards. And Helga runs up. And does she get it too, or does she get away?
I don't remember. I think she gets away, but first the T-Rex spits Walkenstein's guts all over her
Guts
chest.
out. Oh, that's right. And she runs away, and then the cops all open fire on the dinosaur completely.
And he goes down because shooting animatronic animals kills them, I guess.
Yeah.
And Tammy falls to the floor, caresses the dead dinosaur, and weeps. And, yeah, you think that's it. But no, then it opens up back at her house, and it's daytime again. And she very happily trots up to her house and greets her dad and goes inside. Her parents are like, I'm a little bit concerned about her having him up there like that. And I was thinking, what? But she goes upstairs and she starts talking, and then you hear Michael talking to her, and she has his brain in a bowl hooked up to her computer and to a video camera. And apparently he can talk to her through the computer and he can see her through the camera. And she's like, hey, baby, how are you? Does baby want a treat? And then she says something about, I heard they found some frozen skiers. I'm going to check into that later. But then she does a striptease for him, and he's like, oh, yeah, oh, baby, oh, and sparks shoot out of the computer. And that's the end.
I got really excited there for a bit because I thought, Denise Richards was going to do like a full-on like Elvira at the end of Mistress of the Dark or something. I thought, oh my gosh, am I about to witness Denise Richards' first nude scene? Yeah. No, but she takes off her skirt, and that's enough to send this guy into convulsions. So
she's got some like sexy lingerie on, doing her little dance. It's awful.
Trying her best.
Oh, God.
It's not her talent.
It's so funny. I can only imagine that anybody listening who has not seen this movie it has to sound like the most awful thing in the world, but it's really not. It's now, to be fair, it's completely juvenile and stupid, but it just totally speaks to the 14-year-old boy in me.
Yes.
And I just enjoyed it so much. It was fun, and I laughed, and yeah, there was the blood and gore, and that's great. Of course, I love that stuff, but this, you and I haven't talked about it a lot on here because I think we don't want to bum people out, but it's kind of not the best of times, and emotions are high, and we're all kind of stuck at home for the most part, and there's all kinds of shit going on in the world. And so just to be able to sit down for an hour and a half and just look at something stupid and just laugh and not have to worry about the stuff that's going on in the world, it was a really nice reprieve, and frankly, I needed it this week. And I would wholeheartedly recommend this movie to horror fans, to screwball comedy fans, even just people who are interested in, oddities. I just had so much fun with it.
This is a goofy movie in the Mel Brooks vein, right? It knew it was funny. It was playing it all totally up for laughs. Got a little bit of trauma in there with sort of the comedy mixed with the extreme gore and the blood. I think that balance still works for me. I mean, it just adds to the fun, I think. It adds to the over-the-topness of it, because these gore effects none of it's played seriously.
No.
It's all completely over the top. It's all hilariously rubber and over the top. But it's fun. It works. Actually, that dichotomy works. And we'd be remiss if we didn't say a few more things about the director of this movie, because he says that he's the guy who people call when they have a project like this. Like, they need a writer and a director who can come in on some tax evasion movie scheme, which he said this basically was, and quickly write something up and quickly shoot it and make it fun and entertaining. And he's done the Ice Pirates. Have you ever seen that one? That is a hilarious, goofy movie, kind of sci-fi that he came in and ended up doctoring up. But he did Mannequin on the Move, the second one. Mac and Me, which is just kind of like this movie, just super silly, corny, but has a strong appeal, I think, for kids. But then he also did The Philadelphia Experiment, which is a kind of well-respected science fiction thriller. And he gets most of his residuals, he says, from having written Passenger 57, the Wesley Snipes thriller. At least he wrote the first draft of it, and he apparently still makes a ton of money off of that.
Wow.
So, I mean, this guy knew what he was doing, delivered, I think, in spades on the job he was given, somehow managed to make this animatronic dinosaur that he had for 2 weeks into a full-on film that is fun and entertaining to watch. I enjoyed it. I loved every minute of it. And you're right. This is exactly the kind of levity that we need right now. So, yeah. Absolutely.
Well, good. I didn't know if you would like it or not. I actually kind of picked it as revenge.
Oh, you thought I'd hate it, huh?
No, I didn't think you'd hate it. It turned out, and I really am glad that you enjoyed it. As soon as I got into it, I thought that it was right up our alley. So I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Really fun.
All right. Well, anyway, thank you for listening to another episode of Two Guys in a Chainsaw. If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell a friend. We would love to get some more listeners. And if you have any opinions about this movie or any of the others that we've done and you'd like to talk with us, drop us a note on Facebook or on our website. We love to hear from you guys, and we really try to respond to everybody who gets in touch with us. You can find our podcast all over the place. Just Google Two Guys in a Chainsaw podcast, and we will be back sometime in the near future with a brand new movie for you. So until then, I'm Craig.
And I'm Todd.
With Two Guys in a Chainsaw.